Do you know what happens when three different countries feel like home? This is what we're going to talk about today in Navigator Across Borders with my guest, Kusum Mongia. Kusum is originally from India, but she left India a long time ago for the US, then went to the UK, and now she's back in India. We did this interview online, even though both of us live in Bangalore in the south of India. I'm Dorothée Chareron, and I'm a French expat who has been living and working in Asia for more than 20 years. You can subscribe to this channel, but also know that this podcast is in audio version on your favorite platform. And let's dive in. Good morning. So today we are with Kusum. Good morning.
Good morning, Dottie. I'm doing fine. How are you? Beautiful day.
Good. It's a beautiful Saturday morning in Bangalore, but because Bangalore is a bit crazy with traffic, we decided to do this online. It's a huge city and going from one point to another can be a little bit challenging, so we thought doing it online would be a better idea. So could you please introduce yourself the way you would like people to get to know you?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me on your podcast. I'm Kusum Mongia. I was born and brought up in Delhi, India. I lived in India, in Delhi, for the first 20 years of my life. And at the age of 20, after finishing my undergrad in engineering, I went to the US for my first project. I had a job offer, and my first project was in the US, in Florida. And then had no intention of being there for a long time, came back, and then went on another project, and then life happened. And I decided to spend extended period of time in the US. I met my husband, who's also from India, there. And then life just continued. We both went to business school there in Chicago and lived in the US, got married, had kids. And then for personal and professional reasons, we decided to move to UK after having lived in the US for an extended period of time. And before that, I had worked as an engineer, as a management consultant, as a corporate executive. And then we moved to UK, and there suddenly, at that time, my kids were very young. So I decided to let go of the corporate world and decided to become a stay-at-home mom. And so UK, we lived in for 17 years, where I was first stay-at-home mom and then got bored with that life and then decided to go back to school a couple of times. I'm a student forever, love to go back to school for anything and everything. I became a life coach and then went and got an MSc in mindfulness. So I'm now a mindfulness facilitator. So I raised my kids. My husband and I raised our kids in UK. And then when they went to uni, again, for personal and professional reasons, we decided to move back to India, not in the same city where I grew up, but in Bangalore. So I've been here for 3.5 years. So that sort of sums up my life journey. Have lived in 3 continents, and truly grateful for what the life has had to offer.
What you just say really matches with the title of my podcast, Navigate Across Borders. And this is the people like you that I like to have a conversation with. So before we dive into the conversation, I like to ask some fun question to my guests because it's a way to get to know them in another way. So what's one cultural habit or tradition from another country you've adopted into your life?
So I don't know if it's a fun thing, but as you move across cultures and borders,
Yes.
you develop new habits because you're trying to assimilate, and then they become of who you are. They sort of become inseparable from you. So I grew up in India where things moved in a relaxed way. So the Indian time is referred to as IST, which is Indian Standard Time. But in fun, it's called Indian Stretchable Time because not everything starts on time. And I moved to the US and I basically started my professional and extended professional time in America, where everything happens on time, meetings are on time. So I became very conscious about being on time, for whether it is a professional meeting or a personal get together or being somewhere. So that's become a part of who I am. And now that I'm back in India, I sort of question myself, how did I become? Because in India, again, we're back to the Indian stretchable time. So I'm adjusting to that. And the other thing is when I moved to UK, so I've been a city girl. I grew up in Delhi, which was a humongous city. I didn't go into nature as much, but having lived in UK, where there's a lot of greenery around, and there is a lot of culture to just walk. People as families go and walk on Sunday afternoons, walking not for exercise, but just to be in the woods, in the green. And that became a part of who I am when I lived in UK. So I try to continue with that while I'm here in India as well.
This is true that in Asia, I have noticed in general that when people go to a park or something, they really go to exercise. And I have seen this as well when I was in China, where people who are 60, 70, 80, 90 years old, they go to the park early in the morning, they put music on, and they exercise. And this is just part of their life. And I agree that in Europe or in the West, people like to go to nature to just enjoy nature, but they don't always think, oh, I'm going to go there to exercise. So I think it's a cultural differences between the West and Asia. And the time, I agree with you, but I've never heard this India stretchable time, which is an interesting way of qualifying it. And I have noticed this as well. And it's true that for my social life, sometimes I like the stretchable time because of traffic.
Yes.
You know, it's not always easy to be on time, but for work, I am trying to be on time because for me, this is a way to respect people. But in the professional world, if someone is 15 to half an hour late, it's not considered as late for them. It's considered, okay, well, there was traffic. I'm here at 10:30 instead of 10.
So people are not...
Let's move on.
People are not being lazy. People are just working around the constraints that are there.
I agree.
Right.
I agree.
Also wanted
and this is where I learned flexibility
yes.
as well.
And whether it is traffic or whether it is the kid's school bus didn't arrive on time or whatever that reason might be. It's the constraints that people are trying to work around. I also just wanted to say one thing. In Europe, I think, although I've only lived in UK and Europe, but I've traveled in Europe, I think people just go out to be with nature. I would not say that as much about the US, although US is part of the West. And I'm not saying that people don't go out to be in the nature way more than I ever did. But there is a purpose to being outside. So if you're going skiing in the winter, there is a sort of a competitiveness of everything that you're doing.
Do you think it's connected to the culture, this competitiveness?
I would think so. I know I was...
So no matter what they do in the US, it's all about I am competing with someone else, my neighbor, my cousin, my siblings, or all themselves.
Or myself. Okay. And again, I'm generalizing. It's not true for everybody. It's not true for every incident.
Okay.
But there is an addiction to achievement.
Okay.
Whether it is achieving be, clock it certain way that I ran this much for that many times, and so that so there is a slight difference I found between people in UK being in nature versus being people outdoors in the US.
And when you talk about this competitiveness, did you find that when you were working in the US, it was more competitive at work as in the UK or in India? Did you feel this in your professional life?
I would not comment about India because my comparable professional experiences between US and UK.
Okay, so what would you say if you would compare these
US
both
is
places
definitely
in terms
more
of competition?
Definitely.
Okay.
And more demanding.
Okay.
And
Mm.
and I would step back. I say I spent my 20s and early 30s in US, and that is where my professional persona was formed. Because
So how would you define it then? In the way you see the world or in the way you work?
in the way I worked was definitely
Mm.
so it was very clear what was expected of you. The conversations are very direct.
True.
Conversations are very direct, and they're not disrespectful, but it's very clear that what needs to be done, what is your role. Of course, you adjust to people and personalities a little bit here and there. When you are
Yes.
expected to do something, you're expected to do something. The margins of error were fewer.
Okay, so you have less chances to make mistakes. Could you put it this way? Mistakes are not regarded as something positive for you to grow?
I'd say that way. You are not given that many chances to learn.
Okay.
So yes, I mean, you make a mistake, and if you have a healthy working atmosphere, which I did, you can go back and correct it and do it differently the next time.
Okay.
But the workplace was demanding, I would say, in a good way.
Okay.
Having said that, after I moved to UK, I felt that life-work balance was much healthier.
Okay.
And I think as a person, people were a little bit more at ease with who they are.
Okay. So they are trying to blend their personality and their professional life. This is what you mean? Whereas in the US, it was more separated?
More separated, and it was expected to be separated.
Okay.
You keep your problems at home,
Okay.
and you show up. Again, one can debate. There are advantages of both sides.
Sure,
Right.
of course.
But yeah, I found that, and it also could be the life stages I was going through, that I was in my 20s and 30s where I was building my professional career. I was in the US and it worked beautifully for me. And then came motherhood, and I needed more flexibility from life. And it simply could be me as well. But in general, I mean, just look at the amount of vacation that corporate world gives you in Europe versus US. US, it's
This is true because I do know some American people. Like I've met a lot of Americans in Asia, and we had this conversation. You know, every time I say I'm from France, they're, oh, in France you have so many holidays, to the point that some people think you are too much on a holiday. And then I start talking about not work-life balance. I start talking about life.
That's a good way to put it.
Which for me makes a difference because I think you cannot be productive at work if your life and your health are not good. I can be very productive at work if I can rest properly, if I can reduce my stress by having time to do sports, to socialize. But I could not live in an environment where I have to work all the time because I would burn out. But I am also under the impression that in the US, they are more and more aware of mental health, work-life balance. And in some company, I think they are making a very good effort about this. But in other companies, it's still a very competitive American way of doing things. And if you take more than 2 weeks of a holiday during the year, people ask you, why are you taking more than 2 weeks? So people have to justify their holidays.
But that is true. And you are right that they are paying more attention to the mental health because they've had to. The burnout rate and the stress is extremely high. I mean, in a weird way, people like me who are facilitating mindfulness sessions are much more in demand today because people are burnt out and they need tools to find ways to de-stress. And No, that
That's
is
true.
true all over the world. I mean, US.
Oh, yes. Mental health issues happen everywhere. But I feel that COVID put forward this because for a long time we didn't even talk about mental health. And I think COVID, in a way, has this positivity of people and company got more aware of mental
Yeah,
health
and
issues.
it's also not just mental health, it's also societal health. So you notice not just
Yes,
an individual stress factor, the stresses on the societal web, or if you don't have as much time to be with your neighbors or to be with your friends who live across the city, like you and I are not meeting today because of the traffic issues, right? So what are the stresses the society is putting? Those stresses also are now showing up in the American society. So what I'm trying to say is one of the most beautiful things of having lived across 3 continents for me is, in hindsight, I can see what was so beautiful about each of those cultures and
exactly
what
yes
was not so healthy about each of those cultures.
So would you say you learned how to take the positiveness from each place?
Yeah,
In
I
a way?
think so. I'm sure I've taken negative stuff as
Okay.
well, which is not very evident
Oh
to
yeah,
me.
I mean we are not perfect.
Yeah,
I mean, you
yeah.
know.
I
Yeah,
think
this
so.
is true. And another question which I wanted to ask is, what's a fun fact about you that most people don't know?
So this I say that although I'm a mindfulness facilitator and I get a lot of beautiful and nice feedback from the people I work with or my friends about how mindful I am and all that kind of stuff, I know that I'm naturally not mindful. So it is a very
Okay. You mean you are overthinking?
overthinking, running ahead, reacting immediately to, say, adverse situations. So
Okay.
I'm not naturally mindful, but the most beautiful thing that has happened is since I've been practicing mindfulness now for 12 years or so, that I have seen a difference in myself as to how much more aware I am of my non-mindfulness.
Yeah, and maybe you are learning from your customers as well.
And also I
in a
have
way.
to practice. I can't be a good facilitator if I
True.
don't practice, because then it becomes
Exactly.
fake. So
That's
so
true.
that's a fun fact I wanted to share with you.
I agree, because I am a teacher, and whatever I am suggesting my students to do, I always try to apply it to myself. Because even though I am teaching, I'm also aware that even though I'm a teacher, I also have to learn from my students. No matter how old they are, you are learning so much from kids. And for a long time, adults thought that they were the only ones who could, teach something to kids. But actually, kids are teaching you so much. They're not always aware of it. But I think in a way, we're all teachers or coaches about whatever there is in life. Good morning. The reason why I found your profile very interesting and very interesting for the podcast is your diversity, your cultural diversity. So would you be able to answer the question, where are you from? Or it would be kind of a struggle for you to answer?
It is very, when people ask me where am I from, I honestly am confused. So I'm of Indian origin.
Okay.
I'm brown. So in a way, I'm very Indian. I'm very Indian when it comes to food. I love Indian food.
Okay.
I also am very, very, I'm not religious at all, but I'm very, very I'm very impressed with the underlying philosophy of Indian religions, Eastern religions. So they really appeal to my sensibility. But when it comes to my work or
Okay.
professional world or corporate world or what's happening in technology, I'm very American because that
Okay.
is the world I lived
All
in.
right.
So I struggle with the indirect conversations. I struggle with
Okay.
not being on time, things like that. So I'm very, very, it's a very interesting thing, I'll tell you. Last year, I traveled from Bangalore to the US. And when
Okay.
I took off from Bangalore airport or Bengaluru airport, I felt I was leaving home because I was leaving home. I live here now. And then the transition was in London at Heathrow Airport. So there was a few hours of layover, and we were in the airport looking outside. And I lived 15 minutes away from the airport when I was living in UK. So everything felt so familiar. It felt like home. And when the flight
Okay. So home is in different
exactly, and when I
places for you,
landed in the US,
which is
yeah,
actually
and when
good.
I
Why
landed in the
not?
US, my kids lived there, and they came to pick me. They came to pick me up, and I got into the car, and as I traveled, as we drove off, I felt like I was home. So it always brings up this
Okay.
question: where is home?
But I think when we are dealing with someone like you, it's okay to feel that home is in different
Yeah.
places as well. I don't think anything wrong with this because you feel you belong to different cultures.
Yeah, a friend of mine said I'm a
And
child of the world. I agree with that, but there is
you're a citizen of the world.
But also there is a cost
Yeah.
we pay for that.
What do
I
you
think
mean?
some people who haven't lived for an extensive period of time in different places, they have much more of an anchor.
Ah, yes, I
So
understand what
there
you
may
mean.
be times when I feel that anchor is missing. Now, I would not change my life for anything. But there is a cost you pay. You pay the cost in close relationships, whether they are with your immediate family or they are with your childhood friends or whatever. So there is or you're unable to. So what I'm saying is, you gain a lot, you lose some too.
True, but at the same time, this is what life is about. We cannot always be winners, and in a way, is it wrong?
I don't think
Maybe
so.
not. You know, this is what life is about, and as we say, we cannot have everything. And I do agree with you. You know, I am a French person, and I've been an expat for more than 20 years in Asia. And for some time, Hong Kong was home, and I have been in India for almost 8 years. So, you know, in a way, India is home because I understand a lot of things from India. But when I go back home to France, I feel like a tourist, like a foreigner, even though I have my family, because I go there only twice a year. So I am proud to be French. I am happy, you know, to have family in my country. But because I have been an expat for so long, I can feel the big gap between my family in France and myself as an expat. Because expatriation makes you different from the people who, as you were saying, anchor somewhere. So at some point in your life, did you feel you were an expat, or you always felt you were part of the country you lived in?
Interesting question. So when I first went to the US, I had no intentions of settling there. So I felt I'm here for a little bit of time and then I'm going to go back home. But I think then life took over and you sort of start. That becomes your home. Your friends are there. Your colleagues are there, right? In my case, I met my husband there. We had kids there. My kids were, we bought a house there. So it became home. And then we moved to UK, and there we moved to as expats. And there I feel I felt more as an expat, and I never felt it was home for a long period of time. I think
okay.
also because my kids were going to an international school. So all my
Okay. So it's
friend
very
circle was all
diverse.
diverse. And
I
I
agree.
just wanted to say what you were saying about when you go back to France, you feel like an outsider. We only expats can identify with that, right?
That's true.
And one of the beautiful things of living in UK was because we were around expats. We all felt like expats. And I found that my friendships were strongest in that world because we
Interesting.
all were
Okay.
sort of anchorless,
I agree. Yeah,
right?
I understand
So
what you mean.
you don't have to talk
Yes.
about it, but you
Yeah.
resonate, you relate to what the other person is sort of feeling. It's like, how do you do? Yeah. So I say that, again, one of the things I've said that is that when you're an expat, you're clueless as an adult. And that can
Okay.
be very unnerving as an adult. But when you are clueless with other clueless people who are adults,
That's true. It makes it a little bit more complex.
And it makes it also very, you grow deeper friendships with that.
True. And your kids, so you say they are living in the US. Do they feel Americans?
They feel complete.
Or do they feel
they
Indians
feel completely
or
Americans.
British? Okay, so they do have the
We all
American
do.
nationality as well.
So,
okay, all right. So when you came back to India, would you feel you had like a reverse culture shock? Or you were used to it?
I won't call it a shock, but I will call it a reverse cultural adjustment.
Okay. Yes. This is another way to define it. And you told me that you wrote a poem. Do you think it's the right time to read it?
Okay. So So I wrote this poem in UK many years ago, and the poem I wrote was because I lived in the expat world, and people were transitioning from one country to the other, one culture to the other, and every time you transition, there's a lot of hardship. Because you have to change the places you get your groceries from, or you get where you go to the movies, or whatever it is, right? So initially it can be hard, but then you start to discover the good places, the good things about the new place. So on that, I have written a poem.
I'm very happy to hear it, and I'm sure the audience would love it. So let's go. Let's listen to poetry
this poem
today.
is titled Transitions. Here is comfortable, soothing and warm, vivid, colorful, and safe from any storm. There, on the other hand, is confusing and blurred, riddled with questions where murky thoughts are stirred. Here, I think I can control. There, conjures up visions of a black hole. I like the familiarity of now and here, don't really want to go from here to there. But there comes along, like an uninvited guest. It makes me jump hoops and go from test to test. I try on the new world with effort and care, but I don't like this place of being neither here nor there. It is unnerving to not know where I stand. I yearn for stability in this shifting sand. I get busy with turning my chaos into order, creating an art piece with a picture and a neat border. Some new pieces don't fit in. I put them on the side. Memories still haunt. I take that in my stride. Fresh routines start to set in. New people come around. I start to find my feet and can feel the ground. Anxiety starts to fade. Joys seep in. Life starts to take shape. Focus color creep in. Fog starts to lift. I begin to see I'm in the same enchanting forest, but had been clinging to a tree. As I look back on my travels from here to there, a fascinating idea is laid to bear. This journey of life is never from here to there. It always has been from one here to another here.
Well, this sums up what expatriation is about and what it means to go from one culture to another. But I like the words you are using, your question, shifting, storm. So this is everything that people feel when they have to move from one place to another. If you want, I can put the poem in the description if people want to read it again. But I think it really sums up how people feel when they navigate from one place to another. So you say you wrote this poem when you were in the UK. Did you write it because you felt nostalgic, or you felt that you wanted to think about your life? What was the
I think there's
context of this
something very
poem?
specific about my life that was going on in UK. So I'd left the corporate world and I was becoming a stay-at-home mother. And that was a huge, huge transition for me.
Okay.
Because I was a very driven, very focused, achievement focused kind of a person. And here I am leaving everything and going completely stay-at-home mom. So I was going through my own personal transition. So that was unsettling. The other thing was I was in the middle of a lot of expats. So not just me, people around me. There was a lot of discussion about moving from one country to the other. Those conversations were there in my circle. And the other thing is I still remember going to a grocery store in the UK. And there, in the US, it used to be called shopping cart. In the UK, it was called trolley.
Mm-hmm.
Just a simple...
That's true. You have British English and American English, but you also have Indian English.
So there was a difference. And in the UK, you had to put a £1 coin to release the trolley from the thing. That was, I'm not used to it. So it's some basic, simple thing that changed.
Some details.
And I still remember struggling with first time putting that coin in to get the trolley out on a regular grocery store. And it triggered the thought of how simple acts of life can become so trying when you're moving. But in hindsight, and this is another thing I wanted to say, when I think of my stays in US and UK, I can only think of positive things.
Well, that's
anyway,
positive,
so that was I was going through those transitions, and so I wrote that poem because of that.
So what made you decide to come back to India? Because you lived abroad for so many years, and here you are in Bangalore. So what was
there's some personal
trigger?
reasons, family reasons. And I would have done that earlier. I couldn't because my kids were younger and they were going to school. Once my kids left for the university, I was much freer to make changes based on that. And in addition to that, my husband had a professional opportunity to move to India. So it all came together really well.
As Kusum reminds us, every move abroad changes us in ways we don't always see at first. So before you go, here is a question for you to reflect on. If you've lived and worked in different countries, where do you think you truly belong? Do you have a straight answer to this question, or you need to tell a story about your life? Share this in the comments so that we can start having a conversation. See you in the next episode of Navigate Across Border. Like, subscribe, and stay curious.